Welcome to the Mets pod. On today's show, we're going over all of the roster shuffling as the Mets get hit with multiple injuries. We're going to talk about the start to the Mets-Braves series, not going in the Mets' favor, but how they can make up for it even with a split. We're going to take a look at the schedule after that, a tough stretch here for the blue and orange, but then things get way easier. Jacob deGrom back in the rotation, but who will be joining him as Carlos Carrasco goes down? And as always, we will get into your mailbag questions. So a reminder to subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcast, Spotify. You can watch on SNY's YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Mets Pod. I'm your host, Connor Rogers, joined as always by my co-host, Joe DeMayo. And as we sit here today, the Mets have 3 games left with the Braves and a lot of roster shuffling to deal with. They've dealt with some of it already, but injuries continue to hit the team as Carlos Carrasco goes down, comes back from the rain delay, seems to have side tightness. We'll see where that goes as well. Kind of a slop of a first game for the Mets and Braves as Darren Ruff throws 2 scoreless innings, so we'll see what goes on in 3 crucial games ahead down in Atlanta. But Joe, let's bring you in here. We have a lot to talk about with the roster shuffling. Luis Guillorme out for probably at least a month here. They've brought up Deven Marrero. Tomas Nido goes on the COVID list as well. So there's a lot going on here. A lot of questions around Brett Baty and the non-call-up for him. So what's your takeaway as the Mets enter a crucial stretch run here to close out, hopefully winning this division?
I mean, we're all saying Billy Epler didn't do enough with the bullpen. Did you see Darren Ruff last night? It's a heck of a deadline bullpen edition.
Chess, not checkers.
I mean, honestly, it was just, it was a rough day. Things didn't exactly go the Mets' way as far as, the Braves really hit. And, we've talked about this in the past on the show that if the Braves are either going to be on or off because of kind of their approach at the plate. And they were on yesterday, on Monday. So it's kind of what it is, and it feels like it's been a long time since the Mets had one of these games where they just got destroyed, and it felt like you could kind of just phone it in. But, still a chance to take the series. I think Taijuan Walker on Tuesday night is looking to bounce back here based on his last start against Atlanta, where he gave up 8 runs in 2 innings. So I think you're looking for a bounce back there. And then Max and Jake. So things are certainly not falling apart, but just a rough day at the park for the Mets there on Monday.
It's funny to say this about any series against a rival that you're competing for the division with, but the pressure is absolutely on Atlanta to avoid a split here. A split would not be good enough for Atlanta. That would put them right where they started here, 5.5 games back. It would conclude or at least leave this series with 1 more to go. I believe at a 6-10 record, it would give them against the Mets. So the pressure is on the Braves to maybe not sweep, but at least take 3 out of 4. And the way the series is constructed, you're expecting the Mets to do their damage on the back end because of Scherzer and deGrom, which is the makeup of their team. No Bassett in this series, who's their true number 3 right now. So, Joe, they all count the same, no matter the score. It's 1 game. We are going to look ahead because there are long-term issues at play here. Luis Guillorme has been called a surprise, call it a bright spot, call it whatever you want to be. He's a legitimate contributor to this team that is one of the best in baseball, and it's not just with the glove. Luis has found it at the plate this year, makes contact, works counts, and I think, obviously, though, his calling card is the glove at multiple spots. We know he can play a gold glove caliber, second base, third base. He can fill in at shortstop. God forbid anything ever happens to Francisco Lindor. He just needs a breather. Joe, it's crazy if you said this in December, people would look at you like you're nuts. This is a pretty big injury, and the short term has a lot of people not happy right now that the Mets solution is Deven Marrero, a guy that has not hit in the big leagues, a guy that recently has not played a lot in the big leagues. Are you buying that this is the fix for, let's be real, at least a month right now? Or do you think the door is still open for Brett Baty to make his major league debut in August?
I would definitely be surprised if Deven Marrero was on this Mets roster for a month plus. I understand the desire to have a backup shortstop on the roster because you certainly need that. I mean, Francisco Lindor plays every day, but anything could happen. So you certainly want to have that option. And I wasn't surprised that Brett Baty wasn't called up, but this was the first time, and you know me. If you listen to the show, you know me. I'm probably as conservative as it gets when it comes to calling up prospects. I thought this was the right time for Brett Baty. I think he does need some work defensively. There's no denying that. Certainly, most specifically on coming in on balls, that's probably where he needs the most work. But his lateral quickness has improved. He's got plenty of arm to play the position. I don't think he'd be out there kicking balls around. So I don't think he'd be like a disservice defensively. He just may not be a true plus there. And the way Buck Showalter went about it in pregame yesterday kind of felt like the door was still open. I mean, he could have pretty easily said in, better words that, it's not happening imminently, like this is not something completely on the radar. But he specifically was like, yeah, Brett's not going to be here, at least at 4:30. Brett's not going to be here today. Like he was talking very in the present. So you wonder if that door's still ajar for Baty to come up here maybe in the next few days. Maybe it's after they get out of this swing of Atlanta, Philadelphia, and the Yankees. Maybe they get past that, and then a call could happen for Baty. But if the shortstop situation is of most importance, speculation, I don't know if there's any interest in either of these guys, but Andrelton Simmons and Didi Gregorius are both out there that the Mets can bring in if they want a veteran defensive shortstop type. So they have some options. I don't think Baty coming up is, completely out of the question just because he wasn't called up yesterday. I think this was it was just tricky roster stuff with Tomas Nido, like you said, going on the COVID IL there, and then Guillorme. I think from a roster manipulation standpoint type of thing, it just made sense to kind of do what they did, and hopefully they don't need Deven Marrero here in the next day or so.
It does feel like a short-term answer right now while they're trying to get everything in a row here. And Joe, working with you as long as I have, and before that, just being your friend and talking about the Mets, I know you look at prospects as a fine wine, not fast food, and I appreciate that about you because I agree. But I do also, I texted you right away when this happened and said I would like to see Baty. I think he is a guy that will not be overwhelmed. He has hit at every level of the minor leagues. Now, he's played 6 games for Syracuse. One thing I did notice, Joe, is he's only played 4 of the 6. He's played left field for 2 of them. So there's part of me that wonders, over this next week, do they get him in a groove of being the third baseman every single day? See if he continues to hit, because he has hit at Syracuse. He has... since going hitless in his debut for Syracuse, he has 3 multi-hit games. In the other 2 games, he had a hit. So Baty is hitting in every single game for Syracuse right now. We'll see if they get him in the mold of playing third every day. You did bring up other options like Andrelton Simmons, Didi Gregorius. I mean, let's be real here at this point, Joe. I think it comes down to this for me, and I want to know your take. We don't know if Brett Baty is the answer right now, and the Mets might not even know that with as much information as they have. But we do know, unfortunately, not to be down on the guy, but it's reality at this point, Marrero is not the answer. There's not upside. There's a proven track record. He's not going to hit the major league level. So if you're not going to go to Baty, if you're not comfortable with that, don't you think there has to be a veteran option like a Simmons or a Didi? As much as they've struggled at the plate recently, there's at least some kind of track record of more success at the plate and even in the field than Marrero.
Yeah, like we said, I think Marrero is definitely a short-term thing here, whether that is bringing in one of those veteran shortstops, whether it is Baty coming up here in the next few days. Another factor that I didn't mention when I was kind of talking a minute ago, I wonder if they're waiting on Eduardo Escobar to feel kind of 100% again, because in theory, he could be your shortstop in a pinch. Because we're talking about in a pinch here. If Francisco Lindor were to, knock on wood, get hurt for an extended period of time, the conversation's entirely different. But if Lindor just, I don't know, doesn't feel good one day and needs a day off, like if you stood Eduardo Escobar at shortstop for a day, I don't think that would mean like you lost that game. I mean, he's a natural second baseman. The Mets have played him at third, but he's more of a natural second baseman actually by trade. So he has that versatility, and I wonder if that's a part of the equation. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. but obviously Escobar's only hitting from the left side right now, and he had said that he thinks either Tuesday or Wednesday in the next coming days, he thinks he should feel good enough to go back to swinging on the other side. So I wonder if they're like, let's get Eduardo kind of at 100% and then kind of make the longer term move, because it's clear they need to do something for Guillorme's month plus absence that's expected.
Big picture here, Joe, with all the injuries, something that pops into my mind. Marte has been dealing with lower body stuff almost the whole year, and Marte's played great. He's played through it. He's learned how to deal with it clearly. Escobar playing through an injury right now. Guillorme sidelined. James McCann has had multiple injuries. We know Nimmo, as reliable as he's been this year, is a guy that gets banged up as well. They've been very careful about playing Canna too much. McNeil, same thing. Do you think that in September we'll see a legitimate rest schedule built for these guys when the rosters expand to 28 players? You get some of the younger guys up here, or do you worry about them losing that mindset before October hits?
I think it depends where are we looking in the standings. Like I think the Mets really want to obviously win the NL East, but I think they also want to push for that 1 seed, which is
Or
not
two.
out of the
Get
question.
the bye. Yeah, get the bye.
You want the bye in the playoffs, so I think they want to push for being one of the better records. So I don't think it'll be so much like incorporating true rest days. Maybe in the latter part of September, if things are looking more clear as far as where you're going, that they can
Against the
potentially
A's.
do that. Yeah, against the A's and the Pirates and those teams, like maybe it's something you could do. Rest the guy here, rest the guy there. But I don't think you'd set up a big pattern of sitting guys, because the rosters are only expanding by 2, and I imagine one of those will probably be a pitcher. So you're really adding like 1 extra guy. So I don't think it would be a crazy rest schedule, but if the Mets play well enough here over the next handful of weeks, I think it is a possibility that you'd see them do some sort of, all right, we're going to rest Lindor today. Even though he wants to play every day, he's getting a day off, etc.
All right, so one more injury we have to discuss, and we don't know the timeline of it, but it's safe to say it could be a little while. Carlos Carrasco, unfortunately, having to leave the game after pitching an inning after the rain delay. This is kind of one of those things where you always hear why teams are overcautious about bringing pitchers back after rain delays that are, over 45 minutes, over an hour. I'm sure Carrasco was staying loose during it. It's just these things happen. It's tough. Fortunately for the Mets, David Peterson has done an incredible job filling in this year, and it's pretty much a no-brainer at this point that Peterson's going to slide back into the rotation. You have a guy like Trevor Williams that has had success in every single role they've thrown at him, especially all different kinds of bullpen roles, but he can start for you in a pinch. When you look at the Carrasco injury, Joe, you don't want to get ahead of yourself, but because of the timing, with deGrom back, obviously Scherzer's healthy, Megil on the mend, although that'll probably be a bullpen role. It does seem like, and this is not typical in the history of the recent Mets, they are built to withstand an injury like this. That's not season-ending, not a season-ending injury, but built to withstand this in the short term.
Yeah, they are. I mean, David Peterson, you just slide him in, and
he pitched better against the Braves this year than most guys in the rotation.
Yeah, so I think Peterson's a guy that you slide him in, and it almost lines up exactly, because Peterson pitched for AAA Syracuse on Sunday. So he's really only 1 day different than when Carrasco threw. So I would imagine that you'll see Peterson and Trevor Williams pitch the doubleheader on Saturday in Philadelphia. So they certainly have the depth to withstand this current injury to Carrasco, and we'll see how long he's out. The one issue will be if there's more. Knock on wood, hopefully that's not the case. If there's more, then it is Trevor Williams. Is it you reconsider the Tylor Megill bullpen thing? You could be like, well, we thought we need you in the bullpen, but guess where we need you? In the rotation. So I don't think they're well positioned for more starting pitching injuries. But if Carrasco's the only one that goes down, I think they're going to be just fine. Peterson just kind of plugs into the 5 spot there, and he's been more than efficient in the outings that he's had. So I don't think of it as, obviously losing Carrasco is a bummer, and we had visions of Peterson being maybe an impact lefty reliever down the stretch. And, unfortunately with this injury, I think that kind of goes out the window a bit.
All right, so this is the last time we'll revisit the game one of the series down in Atlanta, but this is the only good note takeaway. Darren Ruff throwing two scoreless innings. Joe, I have never seen a guy. Let's be real. When JD Davis could go on the mound, he could throw at some velocity. Ruff was out there throwing 59, 60 miles an hour, a lot of it, around the plate. Do you think the Braves just wanted to go home, or did Ruff have them just completely off speed in this game? It was pretty funny to watch.
I will say, in retrospect, that on JD Davis's Mets career, my biggest disappointment is he never got into a game to pitch. Because going back to college, I remember him in the draft.
Yeah,
At Cal State Fullerton, he was a two-way player. Like
that's
he
what I
was
was
a
thinking of. I knew
reliever and a
he
third
could throw
baseman.
really hard. I think he could hit 90, right?
Oh, he was. I mean, he pitched for the Astros a little bit before
That's what I
the
was
Mets
thinking of.
got him, and he was up to like 93, 94. So
It's
like
crazy.
he could throw. But so we unfortunately never got to see that, but we got to see the hilarity of Darren Ruff doing it. And yeah, I think Atlanta up 13-1. They're just like, let's go home. It's fine. Just swing. Who cares what happens with it? But yeah, it's always funny to see position players pitch. And this one, though, secretly, him going 2 innings is actually a saver for the rest of the season. Like, we can make jokes about throwing 60 miles an hour, but
It's
given
huge.
Carrasco coming out when he did, Adonis Medina not giving the length that you hoped out of there, Joely Rodriguez pitching on back-to-back days, like you're going to need some relievers available. So Ruff doing this saved Buck some of his better bullpen pieces for the rest of the series. So it actually was a series saver in a sense. So that's kind of a silver lining of a 13-1 loss.
No, without a doubt. We talked about it in the five-game series at home when Taijuan Walker had a miserable start and the Mets climbed back and tapped into the Braves bullpen. In this game, the Mets got blown out, but let's be real. They didn't really use any of their high leverage arms. Ottavino needed some rest. Lugo always needs rest. You give Diaz that day off. They were obviously able to preserve those guys because you want those guys to be the bridge. Forget just game two when Scherzer presumably gives you 6, 7, sometimes 8. When deGrom building up this pitch count, which we should see a deGrom pushed a little bit on Thursday, I believe. I think this will be the first that we saw them kind of walking back last time. We've seen them be overly cautious. I think this is where you start to let deGrom go a little bit. If they actually hovered close to 90 pitches in Atlanta, I would not be shocked because it might be a game that you have to win. So I think it's time to push deGrom a little bit. All right, we're going to continue talking about the future schedule. Before we do that, reminder, you're listening to the Mets Pod. Subscribe to the Mets Pod, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. All right, schedule breakdown here, Joe. Obviously, in the midst of a 4-game series with the Braves right now. They got 4 with the Phillies, including yet another doubleheader on Saturday. 2 with the Yankees. And then besides the Dodgers smacked in the middle, it kind of lightens up for a while for the Mets. You're looking at teams like the Rockies, who have just had a miserable year. We have watched the Nationals enough to know what they are at this point. The Pirates, the Marlins, who, really have been disappointing. I think they expected bigger steps, and it just hasn't been there. The Jazz Chisholm injury obviously really, really hurt them. But that's a lot of the schedule, especially when you look at the Cubs, the A's. I look at this, Joe, and I just say, man, I hate to say this because it's almost a loserish mindset, but you play 500 baseball throughout this hard stretch. There is no reason you don't win the NL East. That's how it goes. It's simple. If you split with the Braves in these 4, you split with the Phillies in those 4, and if you split at Yankee Stadium in 2 games, 500 baseball right there, you have Scherzer and deGrom in this rotation right now. There's no reason not to think in high leverage games that you can't split. You're dealing with some injuries right now. Then you get to September. These teams we're all sellers. They're all horrible. They're throwing guys that have no business a lot of the times being in the major leagues yet or at all. Unfortunately, it's just how it goes. Call me crazy, Joe, because that's what I'm thinking right now with this team.
We've been a bit spoiled, right? Where the Mets have kind of beat up everybody for a while now. It doesn't matter, good,
Even the good
bad.
teams.
They took 4 out of 5 from Atlanta. They took the series with the Phillies.
Should have swept them.
Should have
One
swept them.
at bat away.
Yeah, but ultimately, they took the series. So that's kind of what they've been doing. I'm 100% with you. I was going to make a tennis reference as I used to have Roger Federer over one of my shoulders behind me. All they have to do is hold serve. Like that's the really good teams hold serve against the other really good teams, and beat up on the not so good teams. And I mean, you even look at the Yankees, like, honestly, the way they're playing baseball right now, I don't even know if you're lumping them in with the Braves and the Phillies with the way they're playing. They've lost, I think, 10 of 12 or 10 or something like that.
From July 1st, Joe, it's been not
Yeah,
good. It's been bad.
they're not hitting. Giancarlo Stanton's been out. It's basically just Aaron Judge in that lineup, essentially. And I'm not worried about them, to be honest with you. And that series is lining up with Max and Jake to pitch those 2 games against the Yankees. So certainly a split is a good possibility, and maybe you take both of those games. But yeah, hold serve here over this next stretch, and then like you said, the schedule's going to lighten up. You're going to face teams that you should kind of easily take series from, sweep here and there. I think that's kind of the nature of the beast, and like you said, it sets the Mets up to win this division, and I think that's ultimately their first goal is to take the NL East, and then from there it's pursue that bye in the playoffs.
Without a doubt. You obviously like to get in the mindset of beating the good teams because you're going to have to face that reckoning in October. But the Mets have shown us they could do that. And they've shown us they could do it even without Jacob deGrom. And the bottom line is when you go into the postseason, you get, especially if you have that bye, which we cannot emphasize on this show enough, getting the 1 or 2 seed, not having to play that wild card round, setting up your rotation for your first series where you're going, Jake and Max, Max and Jake, I don't care how you slice game 1 because game 2 matters just as much as game 1, but that matters so much, and that's who this Mets team, that's who they are, right? So they just have to find a way to tread water in this really tough stretch. I believe they will. I don't lack any confidence that that's going to be an issue for them, and then you put your foot on the gas in September all the way into October. But let's revisit the rotation one more time. I kind of hinted at this, and I didn't really get your thoughts, so I'd love them. Jacob deGrom, stretching him out. It's weird, right? There's this fine balance with Jake that you could sit here and look where the Mets are, and you don't want to ever get too complacent, too comfortable, but you look where the Mets are. They are a team, and if you ask Fangraphs, it's 100%, as you said before on Shea Station when we did that podcast this week. The Mets are expected to play the postseason, and you could look at it and say, we just need Jake, we just need to bubble wrap him and get him there. But on the flip side, there's some pretty big games right now, and at some point, he's got to go to 80, 90, I won't say 100, but 90 pitches here, Joe. What does that timeline look like? And do you think because it's the Braves Thursday that, I hate to say this about a guy that's been so injury prone, but do we see that accelerated soon?
I think so. I'm pretty sure the target for his last start was 85 pitches, and I think he got to 77, and they just took him out at 77 instead of taking the chance that he would go beyond 85. Rather than just having him pitch to one batter or whatever.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But I think, I haven't seen anything about the target for his next start, but I have to imagine the target is 90 pitches. And if that means he comes out at 83 or 84, maybe 85, that's fine too. I definitely think you'll see him start to get stretched out a bit. I don't think you'll see Jake at all this year pitch like a Chris Bassett game where he'll throw 114 pitches or Max Scherzer could even get up in that range. I don't think Jake's going to get there, and I don't think they necessarily need him to, but there's no question you want him to be in that 90 pitch-ish range, so that way you're really solidifying getting 6 innings out of him, because with the back end of the rotation now, with David Peterson likely slotting in, at least for the time being, we know that he might only give you 4 2/3, 5 1/3 on a given night. So you want as many guys as possible getting that 6+ innings. And if you could have Jake, Max, and Bassett all kind of consistently in that 6 to 7 inning range, I think that'd be a good sign for the bullpen, because that's another factor that we don't really talk about so much when it comes to the innings pitched by a starter is you're going to need the bullpen big time in the playoffs, because you're not stretching guys out to 100 pitches in playoff games unless they're basically pitching a shutout. So you're going to need your bullpen guys to be fresh and ready to work, especially with kind of the new format looking like there's going to be limited days off versus what it was previously. So definitely a factor there.
Before we get to quite a few mailbag questions for today's show, I wanted to throw one scenario at you when I was looking at the construction of the roster and with Carrasco going down and some of the scenarios we talked about earlier in the show. Do you wonder if they've really built it up that Megill's going to come back and be a bullpen option, but having a rotation spot to fill, and it's Peterson's right now, but God forbid somebody needs rest or there's an injury. I kind of wonder, Joe, if there's a scenario where they use Megil as a mini opener. He can go maybe 2 to 3 innings and then pass the torch to Trevor Williams, and they view that as a starting pitcher where, let's be real, when things are clicking for those guys, Megil can easily give you 2 to 3 serviceable innings. Trevor Williams can pitch till his arm falls off. He can give you 5 innings out of nowhere on any given day. That would be, rather than like searching high and low for a guy that you hope can pitch 5 or 6 innings, I kind of like the hybrid option of those two together, especially in September if somebody needs a rest or an extended time between starts.
No, it's a great idea. And, I would hope that would be something that would be under consideration. I haven't really thought about it, to be honest, but it makes a ton of sense. I think the vision as of now is Tylor Megill in the bullpen. I don't think that necessarily means Tylor Megill is a 1 inning reliever for the rest of the season. Like you
Sure.
said, it could be in 2, 3 inning spurts, kind of what they need. It's going to be interesting to see how they approach it because we've talked about the need for that lefty reliever down the stretch. And Joely Rodriguez, to his credit, has pitched better of late. But you wonder if they do end up shifting gears at some point and maybe going more towards that hybrid role you're talking about, almost as the fifth starter down the stretch. Basically, is it more valuable? This is the question. Is it more valuable to have David Peterson as the regular fifth starter, standard, go 5 innings, etc.? Or is it more valuable to have that hybrid Megil, Trevor Williams kind of piggyback situation, and David Peterson maybe emerging as that primary lefty for the stretch run and the playoffs? So I think that's something that should be under consideration by the Mets. I'm not sure if it is. Certainly in the short term, it's Peterson in the rotation, but when you get to early September when they're projecting Tylor Megill to be back, you wonder if there's a switch in mindset because of the Carrasco injury.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to watch it play out. And we know Peterson has struggled when asked to be a reliever, but he's been really good as a starter. So maybe that plays into their strategy as well. And Trevor Williams has probably been a better reliever than starter, although he's found success
Yeah.
in almost every single role. Let's get to the mailbag. So I have a couple questions today, and this one is directly for you, Joe. It's from Steve Miller, who said, where do you stand on Veintos' defense at third base? Is that what would be holding him back from a promotion with first base and the DH spots locked up?
I think what's holding him back. So first off, on the defensive side, I just don't think Mark Veintos is going to be a major league third baseman. I think he's a guy, maybe you could put him there in a pinch, but he hasn't grown at the position the way the Mets were hoping maybe this time last year. So he's been primarily a first baseman DH at this point. And you and I mentioned this on the show back, a month ago at this point, that the time to call up Mark Veintos was then, like a month ago. To get a look at him before the trade deadline, then obviously that did not occur. And at the trade deadline, they made the move for Darren Ruff. And once they got Darren Ruff, that kind of felt like, barring an injury specifically to a right-handed first baseman DH type, so you're talking Pete or Darren Ruff, it didn't feel like there was that path for Veintos to get to the big leagues. Whereas, on the other hand, Brett Baty feels like that path is there because Escobar hasn't hit right-handed pitching at all. Guillorme is going to be out for a month plus, and Baty, I think if you slide him in kind of as the right-handed part of a platoon with I almost said it right and that scared me.
Yeah, it was scary.
Yeah, as the right-handed part of a platoon with Escobar, I think that would be kind of a smooth transition for him. I mean, he OPS well over 900 against righties down in the minor leagues this year. I think he hit something like 320, give or take. I accidentally closed his baseball reference page, but it was something like that. He crushed right-handed pitching. So to me, Baty makes more sense for the team now than Veintos does. And on the defensive side, I think Veintos, you're looking at him more as a first baseman DH long term.
And you said this before. I think the Mets have kind of shown their hand on that. In July, Veintos almost exclusively played first in DH. There was a handful of starts at third, but most of his time was at first in DH. It is interesting now, 2 of his last 3 games in Syracuse, he has played third. Maybe they're giving it one last crack, but I think the reality is what you said, Joe, that he is not viewed as a long-term third base option at the big league club. He's viewed as a DH first baseman, where, as Steve said in the question, those options are not open right now for him, and that's what kind of leaves Baty as the guy that everybody's talking about, because defensively he's in a different place and he has hit at the AAA level already. So, all right. Speaking of first base, here's a question from Christopher Scholes, who said, with the extensions given to Yordan Alvarez and Austin Riley, do you see an extension being offered to Pete this offseason in the range of those contracts? So Riley got a $210 million deal, a long-term deal. I believe it was a 7-year contract. So that would be the range that he's discussing here, Joe. One, do you think that is something Pete would be interested in? And two, do you think that's something that the Mets should get a head start on before, obviously he has arbitration years left?
So Pete, I think, was asked about this by somebody last week, and he honestly sounded a little more non-committal than I thought he would
Okay.
when the question was brought to him. He obviously said, he wants to stay as a New York Met, et cetera, et cetera, but his focus was on winning now, and the contract thing wasn't squarely on his mind. So I wonder if it's something that he wants to play it out closer to free agency, because he has reached arbitration now. So you wonder if that's a factor there. But if I'm the Mets, sure. Why wouldn't I be trying to lock up my kind of franchise superstar first baseman? It's what I mean. I'd be trying to do it. It's just a matter of, it does take two sides to tango, and the Mets are gonna have a lot to do this offseason. I mean, we've talked ad nauseum on this show, almost too much maybe, about the free agents that are to be this offseason. So they have a lot of work to do. Will extending Pete Alonso be at the top of their list? I'm not sure. But if I were in charge, that would certainly be something I'd be at least trying to pull off.
When you look at the timeline for Pete, a guy that didn't get up here until he was 24 years old. So, about, we'll say 24.3. So a guy that was not an old debut, but certainly not a guy that came up. We see all these, Joe, you see it all the time covering prospects of baseball. 20 and 21-year-olds are popping up in the majors every single week at this point. So when you look at it, he will be a free agent in 2025 and he will be a, over the other side of 30 free agent. If you look at it like that with Pete, it makes sense for the Mets to get him under control now as he's in his prime. He's a great player. I think he'll age fine. And maybe get a deal done that takes him to his age 34, 35 season, makes him a Met for life, essentially. You'd be able to figure it out after that. But on Pete's side of things, you just never know what your value is. As great as Pete is, Pete's incredible. As a 30-year-old first baseman hitting the free agent market, is that a risk you want to take? I don't know. I think my point is, I think both sides, it is the best interest of both sides to get one of those deals done that we just saw with Austin Riley. So it's something we haven't discussed for this offseason because they have so many more urgent matters. DeGrom opting out, Diaz, Nimmo, Bassett, on and on and on. But it quietly could be something that makes a lot of sense. All right, the last question from the mailbag from Johnny. And this was my favorite one because I think this could be its own segment. He asked, should Jeff be hitting higher up in the order on a regular basis? McNeil had 4 hits last night, by the way, in that blowout against the Braves. Johnny said 7th or 8th feels like a potentially poor use of his hitting ability. What do you think, Joe?
So I looked at yesterday's lineup. So I saw this question come through, and it caused me to just look at yesterday's lineup, and I don't know, maybe he would go up a spot. I like, especially against right-handed pitching, Nimmo, Marte, Lindor, Alonso, Vogelback. To me, that should be the top 5, on a near everyday basis, as long as those guys are playing. The one thing that I will say is when Marte gets a day off or Nimmo gets a day off, I don't want Jeff still batting down in the 6-7 spot. I want him up high on those days. But when everyone's there, you can make the argument to go McNeil after Vogelback instead of a Marcana or someone like that. But then you'd bring the lefty back-to-back thing. And but I agree with the overall point that Jeff McNeil's been great, and you certainly want him to get more at-bats. But right now, I actually feel great about the top 5. It's been very productive, And, I can't envision, like, which of those guys would you move down in order to move McNeil up, I guess is my question there.
No, you're right. It's a question that is answered with a question, and that's the perfect one because this team's been really good. They win, it feels like, every 3 out of 4 games constantly. And that means something's working. And that doesn't mean something's working. That means almost everything is working. When you're winning at that rate of baseball, I guess it's tricky, right? It's a double-edged sword because you're right, Joe. There's nobody that you're going to... Marte has asked, put me in a spot and keep me there. So Marte's batting second, and he's been great in the 2-hole. Nimmo, ironically, has not been himself in terms of getting on base, but Nimmo's value in working counts of the opening inning is unbelievably valuable. Every time you turn on the game, and if you turned on the game after Nimmo batted, the pitcher has thrown 9 or 10 pitches all the time. And it doesn't matter if it's Spencer Strider. It's not like he's doing it against bums. He's doing it against the best pitchers in the game. Whether he gets on or not, that is valuable. And we know Jeff traditionally gets up there hacking, and Jeff hits a ton. So it's tricky, right? That's the thing. On the side for moving Jeff up, when you talked about bringing up yesterday's lineup, McNeil has a night where he has 4 hits. Escobar and McCann, or Nito, whoever's playing on that given day, obviously McCann in the game we're talking about, bat after him. You're getting a guy on base at an absurd rate lately. Right now, his on base for the year is 371, but he wouldn't shock me if he finishes 390 at this point. And it doesn't matter. It truly doesn't matter. Those guys are not moving runners. They're not driving in runners. They don't hit with any power, especially when Escobar's not hitting right-handed, which he can't right now because of health. So this goes back to the beginning of the show, Joe, where I don't want to move McNeil because of what you said. I don't want to move any of those guys out. But I wish Brett Baty was hitting after him. I do. I think, and I'm not expecting Brett Baty to be a superhero. I'm not expecting Brett Baty to hit for a 900 OPS when he gets up here. But against right-handed pitching, do I have more confidence in Brett Baty moving Jeff McNeil along than Eduardo Escobar hitting right-handed pitching right now? The simple answer is yes.
Yeah, no, I think that's the best way to put it too. It's when you think about the way this lineup is constructed, right now the bottom of the order is a problem, right? Like Escobar, the catching situation. I mean, Mark Canha's at the point now where he's playing less than Tylor Naquin is. So I think Naquin's a guy that you definitely want to see more of him in the lineup with the way he's been playing. I just think kind of the overall McNeil thing is. I think he's kind of where he fits. Maybe you slide him up a spot. Maybe against lefty pitching, you could kind of change things up a little bit. But I agree with your point of one of the bigger issues is Jeff goes 4 for 4, and he does get driven in when he has the triple. Escobar hits the ground out to drive him in. But largely, those guys are not producing. So can a Brett Baty, I'm going to harp back to it like you did, can a Brett Baty come up and even in a part-time role, kind of bat 7th, 8th, down at the bottom of the order, and just provide a little more juice than the likes of Escobar, McCann, Nito, etc.? And I think the answer is a distinct possibility. I don't want to say necessarily yes, but I definitely am not saying no.
Yeah, it's tricky. It was a good question because,
Yes.
I mean, and you also... And I think Buck has been very cautious with doing this. This is a bit, and most of the time Buck's been right this way. He's very cautious about playing lineup Jenga when a guy struggles for a couple of days, or the other way around. McNeil sizzling right now, but he's not going to throw McNeil up into the 5 spot or the 2 spot. He's not moving Marte. That's not happening. We know that he's said that before. So, and I think it's really a pro move by Buck that he lets guys work out of things, or guys that get hot, he doesn't overreact to them and put more on their plate right away. But it just goes to show you that the good of it is, right, Joe? The good of it is that if the Mets can get anything from the 8 and 9 spot, they have such a weapon in that 7 spot. But the bad thing is, besides what we said, which is a little bit of hope, in a 23-year-old that just got up to AAA, or whoever everybody thinks the answer is, there are no clear-cut answers for the 8 and 9 spot right now.
Yeah, and it shows how strong the top of the lineup is too,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Like, yeah, it just shows that the 1 through 5 is so strong right now that a guy hitting the way Jeff McNeil is, it just doesn't feel like there's a spot to put him. So it's definitely a great question. I think it brought certainly a good conversation. And the 8-9 spot is something that I think, all things considered, if that's the biggest problem, the Mets are in a good spot if their
Yeah.
biggest issue is their 8-9 hitters. But that's certainly going to be a situation to watch here over the final few weeks of the season. I mean, it's coming up quick. It feels like just yesterday we were doing the opening day show for the Mets pod, and here we are. There's less than 2 months left in the regular season, so summer goes fast, and it's been an awesome one, and I think it's going to continue to down here down the stretch.
Yeah, you have to wonder if the Mets pod is the good luck charm. Things have gone right since since the show started here for the Mets. Hopefully, it continues that way. Joe, closing thoughts here as the Mets enter the rest of not just a crucial series with the Braves, but obviously 4 against the Phillies, who they've played very well against this year, the Yankees, and then, like we said, hopefully a little bit of cruise control. Don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but what are your closing thoughts today?
Hold serve here over the
Hold
next
serve.
few days. Hold serve, and hopefully the injury bug is going to take a break. It's obviously hit the Mets decently hard here over the last few days. So if that could take a little bit of a break, that would be very nice. And yeah, hold serve, and then get ready for a stretch where the Mets should be able to play much more comfortable baseball.
That's absolutely right. All right, reminder everyone, subscribe to the Mets Pod. Apple Podcast, Spotify. You can watch on SNY's YouTube or on the SNY app, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much, everybody. Catch you next week.